Yeah, it's the 8th. It's the 8th. And today we're going to be finding the slopes of lines. I didn't? Yes, I did. I thought I did. It's recording. Okay, slopes of lines. So the slope of a line is equal to rise over run. Yeah, this. Which is your y sub 2 minus your y sub 1 divided by your x sub 2 minus your x sub 1. So you're going to have two types of questions in your assignment today. The first type of question, you're going to be given some points on a line. You're going to be asked to find the slope. Very simple. So if you look at example 1 on page 188, you're asked to find the slope of each line. They give you the line and they put some points on the line, and the coordinates of the points are point J is at -1, -2. And point K is at 1, 2, 3, 3, 3. What I would recommend you do when you're finding the slope of a line is to label your points. And point J, this is your x sub 1 and your y sub 1. And in point K, this is your x sub 2 and your y sub 2. And it makes a cleaner transition into the slope formula. So your next step is to substitute. So in order to find the slope of this line, you're going to take your y sub 2, which is 3, and you're going to subtract your y sub 1, which is -2. And then in the denominator, you've got 3 minus a -1. And just remember that the formula says y2 minus y sub 1. And a lot of mistakes are made when you're subtracting a negative. Some people just forget the minus sign. But this becomes 3 plus +2. And that's a 5. And then in the denominator, you got 3 minus -1, so you keep change. And 3 plus 1 is 4. So there's the slope of your line. I think you've done this before, so it's a review. Take a look at the bottom of page 189. Concept summary, classifying slopes. You've got positive sloped lines. Lines that have a positive slope, they always go up and to the right. They go up and to the right. Okay? If you're at one point on this line and you want to get to the second point or another point on this line, slope is rise over run, so you rise vertically until you're perpendicular to the second point, and then you run horizontally. And since you rise is a positive. And when you run to the right, you're running in a positive direction. And a positive divided by a positive gives you a positive slope. Negative slope lines. Negative slope lines always go up and to the left. So they go up and left. If you're trying to get from one point to the other point on a line and you always rise over run when you're dealing with slope, you're going to rise vertically, which is a positive direction, but now you're going to run to the left. All right, and when you run to the left, that's a negative direction on the number line. And a positive divided by a negative is always a negative. So negative sloped lines go up and to the left, positive sloped lines go up and to the right. You got zero slope lines. Zero slope lines are horizontal lines. That is a crooked line. For the same reasons with your rise over run, if you have 2 points on a zero slope line or on a horizontal line, and I'm trying to get from the point on the left to the point on the right, I'm going to rise. I'm not going to rise. I'm going to rise 0. Okay, so my 0 or my rise is 0. My run is going to be, in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4 units. So my rise over my run is 0 over 4. And in your calculator, if you take 0 and divide it by 4, it's equal to 0. Alright, horizontal lines. The slope is always 0. And then you've got undefined slope. And lines with an undefined slope are vertical lines. If you're at a point on this line and you want to get to a second point, and you're using your rise over your run to find the slope, in this case your rise would be 1, 2, 3 units. Your run would be 0 units. You're not going to move horizontally, so you've got a rise over run of 3 over 0. And in your calculator, if you take 3 and divide it by 0, push equals, it says error. And error in the calculator corresponds to undefined when you're talking about slope. Okay? No, if you were asked to find the slope of a line, and when you did the slope formula and you divided, and your calculator said error, the slope of that line would be undefined. The message error, the error message means undefined when you're dealing with slope. All right, top of page 191. Parallel and perpendicular lines. All right, parallel lines. Here's the symbol. Just looks like an 11. Parallel lines have the same slope. When you simplify the slope of 2 lines, and that number is the same, the lines are considered parallel. Perpendicular lines. Perpendicular, the upside down T is the symbol. Perpendicular lines have slopes that are negative reciprocals. negative reciprocals, meaning they have opposite signs and the numerator and denominator have been switched. And then we're going to say that lines let's see, how can I say this? Lines would be lines, is that a word? Whose slope is neither the same no, just erase that. Yeah, that's not going good. I can erase easier than you can, though. Let's do a little chart. Let's say slope of line 1, slope of line 2, and then relationship. If the slope of line 1 is 3 and the slope of line 2 is negative 1/3, what is the relationship of the lines? Remember that 3 is the same as 3 over 1. So if the slope of line 1 is 3 over 1 and the slope of line 2 is negative 1/3, the relationship between the two lines is that they're perpendicular. If the slope of line 1 is 1/5 and the slope of line 2 is 4/20, what's the relationship in the lines, between the lines? They're parallel because 4/20 simplifies to 1/5. So the relationship is that they're parallel. Slope line 1 is negative 2/3. The slope of line 2 is blank. But the lines are perpendicular. What's the slope of line 2? Positive 3 over 2. Very good. If two lines are, let's say, neither. They're not parallel, they're not perpendicular, and the slope of one of them is 4. What's the slope of the other one? Say again? They're not parallel. 0 over 4 would work. Because if they're not parallel, their slopes aren't the same. And if they're not perpendicular, their slopes would not be negative reciprocals. Okay? So basically, anything other than 4 or negative 1/4, right? Anything other than 4 or negative 1/4. Alright, so any questions on how to determine if the lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither based on their slopes? Okay, so the next type of problem you're going to have in your assignment today, you're going to be asked to determine whether line AB, determine whether lines AB and CD are, I'm going to use symbols, parallel, perpendicular, or neither. And you're going to be given the coordinates of points that are on the lines. So you got point A is at 3, 6, and point B is at negative 9, 2. Point C is at 5, 4, and point D is at 2, 3. So in order to make this determination, you have to find the slope of each line. And when you do that, please label the coordinates first. So here's your x1 and your y1, and your x2 and your y2 for line AB. For line CD, you've got an x1 and y1, and a x sub 2 and a y sub 2. So you guys remember from Algebra 1 the letter that is the symbol for slope? That's M, right? Okay, so the slope is equal to your y sub 2 minus your y sub 1 divided by your x sub 2 minus your x sub 1 for line AB. So 2 minus 6 is negative 4. Negative 9 minus 3 is negative 12. Simplified, you got a negative divided by a negative, which is positive, and that's going to be positive 1/3. In line CD, your slope is going to be equal to 3 minus 4 over 2 minus 5. 3 minus 4 is negative 1. 2 minus 5 is negative 3. Simplified, negative 1 divided by negative 3 is a positive 1/3. So now you can compare your slopes and your lines are parallel. Anybody have any questions? Okay.